Hello, good morning, Matthew Bowles. How are you today?
Good, thanks, Gia. Yourself?
Yeah, really wonderful. Firstly, I want to introduce to our audience that today we have here Matthew Bowles from Alto Metals. The ticker code is AME, Alpha Mike Echo. And today, Matt, we're actually going to talk about some exciting operations. And before we do that, can you share with our audience by telling us a little bit about Alto Metals and your flagship project, the Sandstone Gold Project in WA?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. We're pretty excited because we are about to start drilling again. It's been a few months since drilling, but we're going to be back there. So Alto, so we own the Sandstone Gold Project in Western Australia. It's in the East Murchison. It's a very large tenement holding over 700 square kilometres. It's a very large footprint over a major greenstone belt.
Mhm.
That greenstone belt's abutted by two major shear zones. So I guess the two, big fluid highways. And it's had a very, very long history of mining. It's already produced over 1 million ounces of gold.
Mhm.
It's had mining activity since the early 1900s. It's located in a fantastic spot. As I said, in the East Murchison, we're surrounded by a number of operating mines. And for us, the strategy is we've been growing our resources, and we've been out there drilling for a number of years. And that resource is growing very rapidly.
Tremendous. Well, look, I can tell you, I'm from WA. I'm very excited about this project. And I think off camera, we already discussed that I'm a huge believer of gold. So we know that Sandstone Gold Project has actually more than 1 million ounces of gold in defined resources and more than 800,000 ounces of which are very shallow and defined within optimized pit shells. So can you please tell us what pit optimized resources mean and what this implies for Alto?
Sure, sure. Just maybe before I go into that, I might just talk about the history a little bit, because that sort of puts it all into context. So I said Sandstone's had a very long history of mining. Had initially was mined in the early 1900s to very, very high grade reefs called Arroya and Hacks.
Mm-hmm.
They were both initially underground, and then later on there was an open cut put onto Arroya. But both of those reefs themselves produced over 200,000 ounces of gold at 15 and 25 grams per tonne. So very, very high grade, exceptionally high grade. It's amazing. They stopped mining there initially when the First World War broke out. So this is how long we're going back.
Yep.
More recently, the mining activity at Sandstone has been based on near surface oxide material. A lot of that was driven historically by an old mill that was just an oxide mill. So typically the previous company, it was mining the oxide material, and as soon as it hit fresh rock, they'd stop mining. Our approach has been sort of to grow those resources and demonstrate there's a lot more potential upside at Sandstone, which we've continued to do.
Mm-hmm.
Initially, it's drilling below some old pits, like the pit we have behind me on the screen there, which is the Lord Nelson pit. So we've been incrementally growing our resources around existing remnant resources, and we've significantly grown those, as you said, to over that 1 million ounces now.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll talk about the other side of it as well, which is the exploration potential and some of the things that we're doing and chasing up some of these much higher grade targets. But the reason we put it around optimized pit shells is, well, there's two things. We based the resource using an Aussie dollar to $2,500 gold price. The
Yep.
reason we did that was our previous resource was using $2,500 Aussie gold price. And by putting the optimized pit shells around it, it just puts a bit more context. Under JORC, you have RPEEE, which is reasonable prospect of economic extraction. And those optimized pit shells are taking high level mining assumptions and putting some parameters around the mining. So you've got those pit shells there. And the unconstrained, which is the 1 million ounces, is I guess all of the potential mineralization that falls outside those pit shells. So sorry, that was a bit of a long-winded answer, but I just wanted to get there
Well,
about why we're doing the two.
actually, Matt, I want to quickly segue back. So, what piqued my interest was that you said that it was a really high grade, so 25 grams, right? So, can you give our investors a bit of an understanding, like modern day, what is the average yield then compared to what was 25 grams before?
So those two reefs were underground, and typically when you're looking at an open pit versus underground, obviously there's larger capital costs.
Hmm.
And bear in mind these were mined by old timers going down old shafts,
Yep.
and just
Way.
chasing the reef, and sort of obviously so what wasn't materially drilled out at the time. But when you're looking at open pit, I mean, there's companies out there now that have resources and they're using sort of, below 1 gram, sort of 0.8, 0.9.
Hmm.
So our resource of open pit material at 1.5 grams per ton, in today's terms, that's fairly high grade. And the reason that we've focused on just keeping our resources from an open pit point of view is obviously the capex is a lot lower.
Yes.
And the other thing that distinguishes our resources from a number of our peers is that it's all free milling. So from what we've seen, there's no refractory issues at the moment. We're getting very high grade recoveries of up to 98%.
Hmm.
So it's a very, very simple CIL process that we can undertake. So I guess we've been de-risking the project all the way along.
Excellent. Sounds promising. So now, Matt, our comprehensions suggest that the currently most defined gold resources at Sandstone are or near the historical open pits. I guess, can you just tell us a bit more about the exploration potential of that project? We're actually more specifically interested to hear about the recently identified high-grade gold targets in Sandstone North.
Yeah. But that goes, I guess, when I initially got involved, and it's a very simple, well, straightforward story, and it's one that I'm sure you've heard many times. It's sort of the company had a very small budget. We needed to go out there and demonstrate that there was a lot more mineralisation outside the defined resources, and we had to pick one target, which my exploration team sort of really struggled with because there are a number of amazing targets at Sandstone, having such a big footprint. I mean, it's over sort of 20 to 30 kilometres, wide by length. So it's a big area to drive around.
Mm-hmm.
So we went to Lord Nelson first. And the reason that we went to Lord Nelson, which, as I said, that's the pit behind. So Lord Nelson was originally mined as an open pit. They
Yep.
mined out the oxide. It produced over 200,000 ounces at sort of 4.5 grams per tonne.
Mm.
When the mining hit the fresh rock, as I said, they stopped mining. So there was a couple of drill hits to the south there. One
Yep.
was 12 metres at 3 grams, and that was where we decided that we were going to step out and see how the mineralisation continued. And we made a new discovery there, which we called the Orion lode, which was 29 metres at 3 to 4 grams. So that was pretty exciting. So that was really sort of drilling below these old pits and chasing the mineralisation along strike and down plunge. And there's another historical pit to the south called Lord Henry, very similar thing. We've been drilling below that. So they were the two of the historic pits, and they're in what we're calling our alpha domain. But somehow there are other deposits, like Vanguard and Indomitable. So they're unmined. So they haven't been, there's no mining activity on those at all, and they were just small resources that we've gone back in and reassessed and undertaken some targeting, and we've grown those resources. So Vanguard has grown quite rapidly from 50,000 ounces to 150,000 ounces at 2 grams. There's a high-grade pit there at just under 4 grams at 50,000 ounces at Vanguard North. That mineralisation is still open at depth and along strike. And then Indomitable, which is a huge oxide footprint over 3 kilometres at the moment. And we keep stepping out, and that footprint keeps growing. We haven't done a lot of drilling at depth, and so we can see the potential of these deposits to grow at depth is significant as well. And that comes back to, I guess, our strategy of when you look at orogenic or orogenic gold deposits or in these Archean gold systems, there is the potential to grow these at depth. They can go for kilometres underground, and so really we're just scratching the surface. And what we're trying to do is build a sufficient gold inventory with open pitable material to support a startup, and then we can chase these deposits underground. Because obviously, as we go deeper, it's a lot more expensive to drill deeper.
I love these stories, Matthew. As I said, I'm a Perth girl and I grew up around the resources boom. And to hear these stories, as you said, small companies striking big, whilst it might sound like a fairy tale, but it really does happen actually only in WA.
Look, it does, and I guess that's you've always got to be exploring because there's a number of stories out there of companies that have made major discoveries, and you're not going to you're not going to make major discoveries if you're not drilling.
Well, that's
Um,
why, it's why you get out of bed every day, right?
well,
For,
that's it. It
for your
is the
investment.
excitement, the thrill of the chase, and I guess that's what sort of drives a lot of my team here. And we do have such a large footprint, and there
Hmm.
are so many targets. It's continually a challenge to prioritise those.
Hmm.
And you mentioned about Sandstone North, and look, we are pretty excited about that. The strategy, I won't say our strategy's changed. It's we're focusing on some of our regional prospects as well. So the last few years has just been about resource growth and sort of demonstrating that we'll grow. Um, and as you're aware, the last sort of 6 months has been pretty tough for gold juniors. So we have been conscious about that. We've been winding back our spend, and we've sort of been looking at. We can see that those resources with further drilling will continue to grow, but it's
Hmm.
about sort of just looking for those next deposits in the pipeline and having those potentially new discoveries. And Sandstone North is a great example of that. There is some historical drilling to the south. We undertook a very large soils program, 400-metre line spacing,
Hmm.
and it was really sort of just to sort of test a new couple of theories that we had. Um, and so the historical drilling sits on a major north-south structure. It's in between, it's at the top of the, if you imagine sort of sandstones, the Greenstone Belt's a triangle. So at the top of the Greenstone Belt, two major shear zones, a north-south structure, and we've got some historical drilling. And then we did this soils work on, I said, on 400-metre line spacing. We came back with a really nice coherent anomaly over two of those lines, so sort of 800 metres.
Yep.
What we did about a month ago now is the guys were out there in the field in plus 40-degree heat, so it's pretty hot, lots of flies. But we infilled that on 40-metre spacing, and what it's highlighted is a very what we consider a very robust, coherent gold anomaly,
Hmm.
with a very strong sort of pathfinder or arsenic pathfinder coherent with that anomaly as well, then that's an indication of sulfides along that north-south structure, and it's about a kilometre north of where the historical drilling is.
Right.
And why we're excited about that is this historical drilling, the results they're very exceptionally high grade, 15 metres at 9 grams, including 3 at 30.
Mm.
And so that's what we're chasing. It's a short strike length, but very high grade plunging shoots. The analogies we're looking at are, this could be the top of something that plunges, so it becomes a small open pit and then potentially underground. But very, very high grade. And I think that's what's resonating with the market right now. So that's why we're excited about that.
And I guess, you've touched on something that I want to ask you now is, look, in the last 6 months, so despite the strong rally in gold prices, we are seeing a lag in Alto share prices. So I'm very curious, like, what factors do you think has actually contributed to this disparity? And what do you think it offers to investors who are interested in exposure to gold assets?
So I think look, that's a great question. Fundamentally, nothing with Alto has changed, and in fact, I think it's improved certainly in the current market with gold price. I mean,
Hmm.
our resources are still there in the ground. The reason that we've sort of defined our resources and used optimized pit shells, we've used independent resource consultants, so it's a very robust resource itself. As I said, nothing's changed fundamentally. We're in a much higher gold price environment than we were previously. The
Yep.
biggest challenge, and you're seeing this, I mean, Lion Selection put out a great sort of chart a while ago. There's a big disconnect, a big disparity between gold price and to some extent gold producers and explorers, and that gap is getting bigger and bigger. And the challenge with producers is they need to keep replenishing ounces. A lot of the producers have wound back on exploration, and it's the typical thing that sort of it's the juniors that are continuing to grow those resources. Um, I don't know what the catalyst is to make that connection sort of re-rate. Is it that the gold price continue to increase? We're starting to see some M&A activity.
Hmm.
For us, it's just about if we continue to grow our resources and demonstrate that there's significant exploration upside in the guise of potentially that's new discoveries, and that's why we're chasing some of these new sort of targets at Sandstone North and so forth. I think that's what's positioning us really well. And from the upside is, I mean, our last raising that we did was undertaken at 5 cents, so we're trading below that at the moment. So there's a great entry point for shareholders or new shareholders to come in.
Hmm.
Um, and we're still well funded. I think as I said, we've wound back our costs. So we've got a small program that's commencing shortly, but the cost of that it's an air core program, so it's quite low. So we're out there marketing this pretty hard and telling people it's a really good story, which it is.
Well, it sounds like you've got great prospects, you're well funded, and it's presenting exceptional value right now.
That's right. Yeah.
Excellent. So I do have an extensive question, so I'm just going to quickly ask you this one. So like given like the widespread valuation across gold stocks, especially junior gold explorers like yourself on the ASX, despite the really high gold prices, we have seen an increased M&A and activity across the gold sector, which you mentioned earlier on. Like for example, we just saw Red 5 and Silver Lake merge recently. So basically companies with attractive assets located in tier 1 jurisdictions like yours are actually prime for M&A. Can you tell us if you are considering possible offers from larger players in the area? Especially, like I said, you're in a tier 1 jurisdiction and your gold price is lagging and also you're well funded, which could really make Alto a good takeover target. So I want to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, look, it's what I can say with that is you're right that we have got a fantastic asset. The size of the resource and the quality of the resource in a junior is fairly exceptional. With the size of that resource, as I said, that's why we focus on open pitable resources.
Yep.
Historically, we've had some M&A interest in the past.
Okay.
That's obviously based on sort of the recognition of the potential of Sandstone.
Mhm.
And really that's where our focus has been on sort of not only sort of de-risking that project and sort of growing those resources and demonstrating it's something of size and scale that potentially could be interesting to other parties. But at the same time, we're running that process that we do want to focus on a standalone operation. And I think that's because you've got to focus on what you can control.
Mhm.
And I think that's really our best strategy going forward. And as to then focus on higher grade deposits like Sandstone North, which really brings in that X factor, is where our first sort of priority is right now. So yeah, that's probably all I can say about that at the moment.
Well, I'm excited. I mean, like we already said, you've had interest in the past, which really shows the potential of Alto. And now, secondly, really, yeah, it's just a matter of time. So, and you can only control what you can control, right, Matt?
Yeah, that's it. That's it. And I think if the strategy is to really sort of just focus on taking it forward independently, and if things come up, they come up, and if they don't, they don't. But I think for us, it's the excitement of that sort of, you're only one drill hole away from a major discovery. So
I know.
that's the excitement.
Okay, so we always look at the senior management and the history of the team, and I've noticed that you have been in senior corporate finance executive for many years, with a huge actual focus on the resources sector, which shines through across your knowledge. So, can you tell us a bit about your history and a rundown about your experience?
Sure. So I've got I guess a mix of big companies. So I worked for Rio Tinto for about 10 years.
Okay.
Yeah. So and I've also worked in a number of juniors. So across that and in financial services and M&A. And then I was working in West Africa for gold, and that's I guess where I got my I guess caught the gold bug. I love gold. I think it's a great, very sort of fantastic commodity. You can find it anywhere in the world, and you can fly it out, so you're not sort of really limited by infrastructure as much.
Mhm.
And then sort of, yeah, getting involved in Alto a few years ago now, initially as a non-exec, and sort of we had a couple of hostile takeovers or takeover approaches, and then moving into the MD role and really sort of just growing those resources. So that's it's been a great experience and drawing on a lot of that to get to where I am today, both from big company and smaller company background, and working out how to take these projects forward. It's certainly a different type of management style and experience in junior companies, and sort of obviously trying explain to the market what your strategy is and how you're taking these projects forward. But look, I mean, I'm also supported by a fantastic geological team here, who've
Mhm.
been with the project for many, many years, and that's having that knowledge in-depth knowledge about the project and all the deposits there is certainly of great value. And that's also supported by my board and some of the key consultants that we have, such as Barry Bourne and Ed Boltus are two very well-known gold geos. Ed's had a lot of structural experience. They've both been involved in some major discoveries, so these guys know what big discoveries look like. So that's really good to guide our team. So that the team are aware of what they should and shouldn't be looking for, and sort of when we're looking to sort of come up with new drill programs and sort of targeting and so forth. And then on the board, myself, Richard Monty, and Mark Connolly. So Richard's been involved in a number of big discoveries as well, in both, I guess, corporate outcomes, but also sort of in production as well. So it's a small board, but a very sort of experienced board in that gold space.
And talk to me a little bit more. What really caught my eye about your experience was that you have great financial discipline. Could you just tell us a little bit more about like your previous history in corporate finance and how that's now obviously leading Alto Metals, and how that's, I guess, bringing value to the company?
I guess, I mean, a lot of that background was, again, in the M&A space, and looking at, I guess, what makes projects attractive to others. And also sort of dealing with a lot of the equity capital markets and working with a number of brokers on how to market stories to investors and how you can differentiate yourself from a number of your peers. On the discipline side, it's if you give money to geos, they'll just go off and drill holes, and sort of you've got to put some parameters around that.
Yes.
And I guess, the optimized pit shells are the great example of that. We're now sort of targeting how we drill, where our drilling is undertaken. Is that for resource growth, or is it going to be outside of those pit shells, and then sort of asking the geos what they're looking for outside of those pit shells, and will it sort of pull that pit shell down or not? So really, I guess that's the discipline around, rather just going out there and drilling, which is why I said we have that constrained versus unconstrained resources. And then, and that's versus against looking at regional targets. And sometimes there's better regional targets to drill than there is, I guess, step out resource holes as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Matt. The final question I really want to ask is, so I guess to sum it up, what do you want to say to our community of investors who are looking to either diversify, reposition, or rebalance their portfolio into the lucrative gold sector?
Yeah, look, I think, Alto Metals I believe, a standout sort of proposition. We're certainly sort of reasonably valued at these prices, and if you're a believer in gold, as I am, we've got the best of both worlds and that optionality. You'll see from the map that where we're located, we are surrounded by a number of operating mills. And I've mentioned that we're also, our primary focus is a standalone, but there is that optionality there. That's why we've been growing our resources, and we also have the exposure of an underexplored greenstone belt, which has the potential to deliver, multiples on where we currently are. So if you think about these bigger greenstone belts, they're very, very well endowed, and we're really only just scratching the surface of sandstone. So I think from an exploration potential, we haven't demonstrated as much as is that sandstone, and also that resource growth side. It's really sort of growing quite rapidly. So it's a pretty exciting proposition.
Excellent. So I think just to cap it off again, what we just said is you're well funded, it's share prices are lagging, prospects are significant, and we are led by a very strong management team that actually knows what big discoveries look like.
That's right.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Matt, for your time. I really enjoyed myself. I will be closely looking at your results over the next year, Matt. I'm very excited for you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks. That's a great opportunity to speak about the project. I love talking about it. It's a fantastic project.
Well,
And
your passion shines through. You're very technically competent as well, and alongside with your, your strong financial acumen, I think that's exactly what we're looking for in the senior leadership team.
Perfect. And look, I'm happy to with your viewers, if we've got other questions. I don't know whether it's appropriate but that they can sort of fire emails, questions through to you via email, and I'm happy to sort of come back and answer that if we can.
Yeah, our viewers are very activated, very engaged. So if we have any questions, viewers, please send them through to us and we'll be definitely probing Matt for some responses.
Awesome. That'd be great.
Thank you so much, Matt.